biggest tip to all candidates that are going in for an interview is do your research on the company. Every company has an About Us page, has a What Life is Like at this particular company page. Get on and have a look, because it'll talk through the values that they hold. It'll talk through the behaviors that they like to see from their people. So I think it's really good to make sure that you're able to talk to those, and you don't have to copy everything word for word, but have a look at a couple of things that really jump off the page at you and are really important to you, and talk to those points. My name's Fallon Wanganeen. I am a proud Narungga man, so the Narungga peoples are of the beautiful York Peninsula in South Australia. Even things as simple as, Googling behavioural questions and having a bit of practice at home with yourself or with a friend or your partner or a family member, because I think writing your answers down versus actually verbalising them, you'll note that while it sounds good in your head when you've written it down, when you're actually saying it to someone, it might not come off the way that you're wanting it to as well. So take the time, and particularly with behavioural questions, they're looking for a STAR method or a particular way of answering it. So I think being really comfortable with being able to do that is important.
I'm Kyra Galanti. I'm a Gubborn woman from the Goldfields region of West Australia, Kalgoorlie, Coolgardie and Southern Cross. What you would do is making sure that you include your travel time to and from home to be there. It's always good to be 10 minutes early or 15 if you can. And then also making sure, prepare yourself around what you're wearing, your hair, all of those little things that make you stand out as a candidate, but it also shows that you're actually committed to the role that you want to get. And then making sure that if you have a contact number of the person that you're meeting, know who they are, and so that if anything happens, because some unforeseen circumstances do happen, traffic for example, you have someone to contact to just notify them that you're being held up and you're running a little bit late. So it's being courteous as well.
My name is Rory Smeaton. I'm a proud Kurnow man from Gippsland, Victoria. The most important steps to take, I think, are understanding the company. So looking on their website, looking at their values, work they've done before, because that helps build your knowledge of the company, which really helps you through your interview process. I think understanding, what some of the interview questions are. So, talk to the recruiter and understand, what type of interview will it be? They might go, well, we'll ask questions around this area, around your resume, teamwork and so forth.
My name is Desiree Kilduff. I'm a young Noongar professional living and working on Wiradjuri and Bunurong country. It's also really important to research the organisation, so why you want to work for them. So it's important to look at their websites, social media and any other resources that they provide to really understand what that organisation is about. It's also really important to practice your introduction, conclusion and any questions you might have for the employer.
Good first impressions come from when you get the call to say you've got an interview. So, really great, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to that. So, being courteous over the phone, getting all the details you need so you don't have to call up again. So asking, if I could get that in email, things like that are really great first impressions, because a recruiter loves somebody who doesn't have to call back a million times before their first interview. Rocking up on time, so being there, 15 minutes before, maybe going the day before to find out where you need to go. Little things like that are really critical to understanding, recruiters sometimes can be quite busy, so, they don't have time to fluff around. So doing all those little things, it goes a long way, and being courteous and understanding, your interview might be pushed back because the last interview is running over time. So being courteous to leave time if you are, having to go to another job, there might be some times you need to go from there, and understanding that that's what happens.
It's very important to create a first impression. Time, etiquette, dress sense, style, not so much in the style but more in those main things. It's really important because it's that first meeting that stands out when they make a selection of who the right person, just from that first engagement.
As you are being perceived by the employer based off your first impression, they're envisioning you in the role. So it's really important to create a good first impression. You can do this by relying on your preparation as well as your personality. You are the expert in this situation. You understand what your prior employment is and what your skills are. So if you're prepared and you bring a bit of personality to it, it's definitely going to set the employer up to know what you'll be like in the workplace and what you can bring. So for greetings, in terms of handshakes, this one can be a bit tricky these days. So I find that it's a good way to kind of break the ice and have a good laugh when you're, entering the interview. So a lot of people, may still go for the handshake, or they might want to do the elbow bump. But I think it's a good way to kind of just have a little laugh and, go for, you'll see what the employer is looking for in that instance. They might want to do a handshake. So if you just follow their lead, and you'll also give a good impression as well as meeting those interview basics as well.
Getting the basic right is really important. It's not the be all and end all, because you could have a rough start to the interview and come good at the end, but rocking up on time, having all the paperwork that they've asked you for, and it might be a neat folder and not all scrounged up, not being half an hour early, maybe being 15, 20 minutes, having some open dialogue, conversation, a good handshake, sitting up straight and not slouched, and little things like that can really make a difference, because sometimes the recruiter might ask all the questions and the hiring manager might just sit there, and it'd be quite intimidating, someone just sitting there and staring at you. So just be comfortable in yourself, have your hands on the table. Little things like that can really go a long way to understanding. And also pausing, having the basics of, you don't have to answer every question as soon as they ask. Pause, have a think about it, and then answer are really critical as well.
So this is your chance to make a good impression for the employer. So it's really important that you're dressed appropriately for the role that you're seeking to secure. So making sure that your attire is neat and also presentable while still showing some of your personal style. It's really important. I also believe it's important to print a few of your resumes. So if you understand how many interviewers are in front of you in the panel, just make sure you bring enough for each interviewer to have your CV in front of them, so they're able to refer to it during the interview process.
It says a lot that you're confident and that you know those etiquette, because it's not just in an interview that you use those etiquettes, you use them everywhere else, especially when you do business with customers or clients or community. So it's always a good thing to actually do those little things, eye contact, saying hello, trying to remember their names. So when you remember their names, another area to focus on is when you're respond with their names, because it says that you have already acknowledged and formalised a relationship with them. And people like that. People like that you can refer to them on a first name basis, even though you just met them.
I think doing the basics right is super important, particularly the dress code. And, I thought back to some feedback I got from an interview that I went into when, I was about 19 years old. And I had not like a business shirt, but it was a long sleeve button up, but it was a bit patterned. I think there were a couple of rips in my jeans, and I had some sneakers on. And while I interviewed well, the feedback came back around how I was actually dressed for the interview. And I think for me, that came back to that, not necessarily having anyone around me that was able to give me that feedback as well. And that's something that's so easy that I could have had a completely different outcome if I worn some proper pants or jeans and had a nicer shirt on. It's a different result, right? So I think things like attire, turning up on time, or even getting there early, can't be dismissed. And again, we've got this handshake thing, and now we've got remote and virtual interviews as well. So I think, it's just being confident in there and making sure that you're giving off a warm vibe to get one back.
I believe that knowing your interviewers by name and who they are, a little bit of background on them, how long have they worked for the organisation, you're able to find all this information on LinkedIn or any other articles that have been made about the person. But I do believe that knowing who your recruiters are and being able to even refer to it during questions such as, I understand that you've been working for the organisation and you started as a consultant and you're now a manager. Can you please tell me about the career progression within this role?
Just a little bit something like while you're talking to the recruitment team or whoever is phoning you to book your appointment, ask the questions. Is there anything that I need to know? Is there any information that you can give me that may support me? It's those little things that you don't know that could have a bigger impact when you step into that room, to be confident.
When I think back to a candidate or candidates that have really blown me out of the water in terms of coming to an interview, is that preparation piece. So they've done their research on the company and are able to comfortably and confidently talk to that. They know the role, so they've skimmed through the JD with a fine-tooth comb, and we're really able to confidently talk to that as well. So I think understanding someone who's prepared, and when you're prepared, you speak confidently too. So I think that confidence comes through the person, whether it's face-to-face or over the interview, as you know that they've done their homework. And to me, seeing someone that's done their homework lets me know that they're serious about the role as well.
A candidate has really done the research on the company. So, and they went as far as researching what our Indigenous commitments are. So they looked at our Reconciliation Action Plan. I didn't need to ask about it because that was the question they asked. They said, I see that you have that. I could see myself playing a role in that. I can see why you need someone in this particular role. And what would you see me playing a role for that? Like, is that something that you consider? How are you going with your Indigenous employment? What's your Indigenous spend? How many Indigenous people that you have employed within the business? Because it kind of sets the frame around, is this a company that they want to join? So I like it when people ask me that questions, because it tells me that they've researched us to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, but why we're committed in this space and why that creates an opportunity for the employment for that role.
Something that's really impressed me in an interview is when a candidate was able to provide an example of a past initiative that the organisation had undertaken in the community. So that really, went above and beyond to show that they've done their research, that they've understood that their values have matched something that the organisation's done, and they were really able to tie that in together as why they wanted to work for the organisation.
What a candidate's done in the past to really impress me is come in and be confident in themselves. Not being too over the top, going, I've got this role. A candidate I remember at Crown was a high-end cocktail maker. We're looking for a specific cocktail maker that understood, certain things. And the person come in and it was just more of a conversation. We had chats about his work and what he'd done before and some of the things. And it just flowed. And, by the end we were answering questions before we were even answering questions. And it was really great because he knew about the company, he'd researched, he'd come in, he'd spent time at the bar and he saw how everything worked. And then he was able to talk to that, how he could fit in, and then that hiring manager goes, I can see him working in there. So they actually hadn't seen him work in there, but through conversation, they understood, he planted that picture in the mind of him working in that bar. And it was really great. Like, there was no qualms of him, doing, not being able to do the job. So he planted that picture in the mind of, to the hiring manager of, this is what I'll look like in the workplace. And it worked well, and we didn't have to interview anyone else because the manager was stuck on that person. So I think that's really critical. Of he owned his own story, and it just worked well.
It's really important that you're preparing for the conclusion of your interview. So that's making sure you have questions to ask the employer. They've asked you about a million questions, so it's your turn now to ask them. So during this time, it gives you a great opportunity to really understand what the employer can provide you as the employee. So you're going to want to ask questions that outline, what the organization's culture, what their values are, as well as what they can offer you in terms of progression, as well as support that they might be able to offer you during your employment. But definitely preparing about 4 to 5 questions where you're able to really cement that you've done your research, you understand the role, and you're actually really keen to hear about what they can offer you as an employer. The employer will really love that because it gives them an opportunity to really boast about the company and what the great things are that they can offer you.
Look, I think in terms of questions from the candidate, it really comes back to the individual, but I know in terms of what's been important to me have been culture of the team, what's the organisational structure, what are the opportunities for career development, are there any kind of social things that the team might be doing, how many people are actually in my team as well. Again, depending on what part of the interview you're in, obviously salary is a great thing to talk about too. So I think depending what part of the process and what are the things that are important to you, the more questions, the better. And it's great now in most interviews, at the end of that, there will be kind of 5 or 10 minutes where the candidate will get to ask any questions of that. Of the interviewer, and whether that's something you've come in prepared with or whether it's something that you maybe have uncovered, because you may not get another opportunity to ask it. So make sure that when you're in there, anything that you think is important or you really want to know, just ask.
It's really important to practice your answers to interview questions, because if you're reading on a piece of paper just in your head and it sounds great, what you're going to what's going to come out your mouth is going to be totally different. I've done many things over the years where I've done big interviews and talked to many people, to large crowds, and the best thing I found is talking out loud and answering the questions, because then you train your mouth and then it comes out naturally. You don't want to over rehearse and sound like a robot. I've had candidates before that have come in and have pretty much said the spiel of what we've got on the website, and it hasn't been great because it's just very generic. So if you practice the questions out loud, that's great. Train your mouth, you look natural, you can use your hands, and you can really, look natural and get an understanding with the manager of what you're trying to get across.
So that's really important, because if you get to practice it, then it gets to be embedded in your brain and it really, again, demonstrates your strengths in your responses when you answer to those questions. Going in blindfolded sometimes doesn't work because you get nervous, you get anxious, and because you can't remember the questions, then you have a block, and then you overthink these things. So it's always good to do practice, whether it's in the mirror or have someone sitting there asking you the questions to practice, and record yourself. If you record yourself, getting someone to record you while you're doing a mock interview, you can actually see yourself when you play the video over around your errors and things that you can correct.
You'll find that during the interview, an interviewer might ask you a question that you haven't prepared for, or you haven't really come across that situation in a previous experience or in your life experience. So it's really important just to say, to the interviewer, hey, I actually haven't had that experience before, but in this instance, this is what I would do. And you can run through a similar situation, or you can run through what you would do in a situation that you've made. And yeah, it's just really important that they understand, again, going over the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So if you're able to flow through that, provided an example that you haven't been through, it's really important just to be able to break that down. That's really what they're looking for.
If you don't know how to answer a question at an interview, really good technique, have water there, because then it gives you time to reset and rethink and refocus. But don't be afraid to ask, can you ask the question again?
I think after the job interview, obviously at the time, is thanking whoever you've interviewed with for their time and for the opportunity to be able to meet face to face and introduce yourself and go through that process. And I also don't mind actually asking what the timeline is around next steps as well at the end of the interview, because that again shows that you're keen, you're interested, and you're organised. So basically off the back of understanding when they've advised you that you may hear back, is following up on that if you haven't heard anything at that time. And again, you can use that in terms of saying, at the end of my interview, you mentioned that by X date, I was going to be contacted. That was yesterday, so just following up. So I think follow-ups are good and encouraged. Some people feel like they're bothering the recruiter, but again, recruiters are really busy, so it might be something that they've just missed out on. But again, I wouldn't continue to hound the recruiter because then that gets a little bit annoying. But I think a friendly reminder and follow-up on an agreed upon date or after an agreed upon date is a great way for the candidate to go about it.